Welcome to the Israel Dialogues. We're glad to have you here. Welcome to Holy Blossom. Holy Blossom is really pleased to be sponsoring this. My name is Les Rothschild. I'm chair of the Israel Committee at Holy Blossom. We've got a really interesting, I think, program for you today that'll hopefully spark some questions and some discussion. So without further ado, I will turn it over to David DeWitt, and he will start doing that. Go ahead, David.
Thanks, Les, very much. It's a pleasure to invite everyone back to Israel Dialogues. And today it's particularly a pleasure because we have the opportunity to hear from and then speak with a lawyer, a scholar, and an activist who is challenging the conventional ways many of us have been thinking about the future of the Middle East, in particular, the relations between Israelis and Palestinians, where many of us have kept in mind a focus on the notion of a two-state solution. You will hopefully all have read Dr. Yehuda's co-authored article recently in Foreign Affairs that was sent out with the invitation. It's entitled A Two-State Solution That Can Work, The Case for an Israeli-Palestinian Confederation. It's a challenging piece that will lead us, I think, to explore some difficult and meaningful issues around how one can make politics work in a very practical way in the midst of a protracted situation of conflict. So before I call on Limor Yehuda, let me offer a very brief introduction. Dr. Limor Yehuda holds a PhD in law from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, where she's also received her earlier degrees in law, undergraduate degrees. She's currently a senior research fellow and director of the partnership-based Peace Project at the Van Leer Institute in Jerusalem, and she lectures in the faculty of law there. She's also affiliated with the Truman Research Institute for the Advancement of Peace and at the Minerva Center for the Rule of Law under Extreme Conditions at Haifa University. It should be noted that Limor's dissertation won the 2020 Malcolm and Judith Shaw Prize as the outstanding doctoral dissertation in the fields of public and international law and human rights. And that led to a book, an important book, that's available through Cambridge University Press, entitled Collective Equality, Human Rights and Democracy in the Resolution of Ethno-National Conflicts and Peace. Before Limor came back to the academic world, she spent 6 years practicing law and in Israel's Supreme Court as a member of Chief Justice Aharon Barak's legal team, and later as a human rights lawyer and director of the Department for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories at the Association for Civil Rights in Israel. Let me stop there and really just ensure that we have lots of time for Limor to share with us her thinking, her work on this important topic, and to ensure there's lots of time for a conversation that follows her presentation. Thank you, Limor, for agreeing to spend time with us this evening, your time, this afternoon for us. The floor is yours, or the screen is yours.
So thank you very much, David, for the invitation, and I'm really honored and happy to be with you and looking forward to the discussion that we will have. So I have a big task, I think, to squeeze everything, or at least some of the things that I have in mind, to as short as possible of a presentation that we will have enough time for discussion. Okay, so as David said, I am a lawyer in my past, in my profession, but I chose to go back in a way to rethink how we need to envision our future here, and especially how to envision the end for the long occupation of Palestinians by Israel, because it is detrimental to Israel, this status quo. And that was clear for me for a very long time. And that's what brought me back to my studies and to think. So what I want to do is to share a presentation, and then just a second, sorry. Okay. So I labeled my talk today from mutual destruction to a two-state solution that can work. And also I will try to get to the question of what can Israelis, Palestinians, and their supporters do in order to do that transformation. My agenda for the talk is to start with a note about the current moment. I am sure that you are all aware of where we are at, and especially with yesterday's results from the States. And then to touch for a moment about things that I've learned looking at other places from ethno-national conflicts, to offer a vision of a two-state solution that can work, and explain why we need to shift how we think about it, to offer a glimpse of a transitional process that can take place, and maybe to touch on what can we do about that. So a note about our current moment. Our current moment is very, very dark. And it's not a moment, it's more accurately a dark era in our region, and also with the Trump rise, also maybe also in yours, although you're not in the US, you're in Canada. So my assumption is that we are in a moment of great uncertainty, and I have no idea where we or the world will be in 6 months, in a year, in 4 years. But what I do know is where I want us to go. Us, I mean in Israel, Palestine, and why I think it's a good idea, and how I think we can pave the road to get there. Not assuming that it will be a quick job, a quick road, or a quick getting there. And today in my presentation, I will, of course, focus on the destruction that takes place in Israel, particularly between Israel and the Palestinians. I will not talk about the internal collapse of Israel in these days, although it's all connected. And I will offer a new way for thinking about the present and the possible future. I want us to look at that. So it's in Hebrew. I'm sorry, maybe I could find it in English. It's like the starting point for us is that there is very little support in Israel for a two-state solution. This is right, like it was published in Haaretz just, I think, a week ago. It says that only 21% of the Jews are supporting a two-state solution. And if you look at young people between 18 and 34, it's only 8%. And if you look at other like religion and ultra-Orthodox, it's even less than that. Another very how do I say it? Troubling result is that 45% of Israeli Jews prefer regional war over regional peace. So I don't know what it says, all those polls. I just say that that we must assume that any support for peace at the moment is almost hardly existing. So I want to go to in a way to portray what are grand alternatives when we're thinking about conflicts like ours. And I identified, as I will do that soon, I identify our conflict as a group conflict or ethno-national conflicts and look at what are the alternatives, okay? So first alternative is control. Structure and control could be in different forms. It could be structural discrimination. It could be military regime. It could be occupation. It could be official apartheid. Another alternative that we see from around the globe, okay, it's a strategy of elimination, which is composed of ethnic cleansing and genocide. And the alternative to those two is coexistence. And in our case, thinking about it as binationalism, I call it collective equality. And this could happen in different formats. It's not one format or one political model. It's more a conception. It's more a principled. And it could happen in our case in one state, in two states, or even in more states. But in general, we have those three frameworks. One is control, the other is elimination, and the third is coexistence. So a few words about learning from other places. As I already said, I use the framework of ethno-national conflicts. And it's not usually being used to, although it is typically being framed, our conflict, especially by Israelis and the people that adopt Israeli viewpoint, we do look at the conflict as a national conflict. Palestinians will not use that term. Most of the Palestinians and people that or more critical viewpoints today will use colonialism or decolonization or settler colonialism or apartheid, etc. It's not the same thing, but those will be the frameworks that they will use. And also, it also influences what kind of other cases you're looking at. So I chose this one mainly, mostly because there is a lot of data on that. There is a lot of writings on that, a lot of knowledge that had been developed over the last few decades. And I think we can learn from that. And it's a very valuable things that we can get out of them. So one thing that like it was very interesting to me is to look at that and to see that ethnic and ethno-national wars are actually the most common kind of war in our time. Actually, almost all wars are ethno-national wars. Hardly we have all interstate wars, although this is how we think about wars, that are interstate wars. But actually, our conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, is within the most typical type of conflict of our times. Okay, I take one example. I use it in the book, and so I studied it also before the 7th of October. I started to use it even more after the 7th of October. When I studied it during the last decade, I was thinking to myself, I studied this and Northern Ireland conflict and also the Cyprus conflict. And when I was looking at the Bosnia conflict, I said, okay, in our case, we didn't reach that kind or that level of violence. But since 7th of October, this is no longer true. So I will just say that the war in Bosnia developed during the 90s, since 92 until 93, five for 3.5 years. It was part of the disintegration process of Yugoslavia and more broadly, the disintegration process of the USSR, the Soviet Union. This area of Yugoslavia was the most heterogenic part of that. It included almost half original Muslims, Serbs, Orthodox, and Croats in these numbers. So the war started a day after the Muslim leaders, together with the Croats, announced the independence of Bosnia. in contradiction to what the Serbs demanded. The Serb minority in Bosnia, which were not a minority, were a majority, or at least there was a dominant faction in Yugoslavia and hold the army of Yugoslavia, objected that process of independence from Yugoslavia, Serbia, and because they went into that without that, with the approval of the international community, that led to a war. The logic of the war was ethnic segregation, and the policy was by ethnic cleansing. And the results of that war that lasted for 3.5 years was about 100,000 dead, millions of refugees and displaced, tens of thousands that were tortured systematically, including women in rape camps, and also an event that was declared by international courts as a genocide, the infamous case of Srebrenica. The war, so all those atrocities are continuing for a very long time while the international community is watching. And it ended only after 3.5 years with the heavy involvement of the US, coercion and heavy coercion, but also with semi-coercion mediation by the US, leading to the Dayton Peace Accord, a comprehensive peace accord between the three sides to this. At the beginning, the analysts were very skeptical about the success of this peace, but eventually we know that the war did not return to Bosnia, although there are a lot of problems. What the agreement is about, it is about a very prominent part of the peace agreement is a new constitution for Bosnia-Herzegovina, a new constitutional order that is, in a way, in 2 words, says together and apart. And this is the presidency of Bosnia. It consists of 3 people representing each of the peoples of Bosnia, 1 Serb, 1 Croat, and 1 representative of the Muslim community. But also apart because they are taking Bosnia and creating that as a bi-federal, like with federalism, using 2 parts with autonomous authorities. So as a whole, I call it together and apart. How do they do that? Like the war, the land after 3.5 years of horrific war is no more than a rubble. There is a famous saying about that, right? But the international community is establishing a transitional international authority to not only to bring. David is nodding his head for something. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so that takes a lot in the process of how we are taking this torn apart land and transform it into a new state, a functioning. Why and how did they go for power sharing? Okay, this framework of together and apart is called in the literature power sharing or power sharing democracy. And for the why I say, because the world refuses to change international borders and legitimize ethnic cleansing, and because they are physically intertwined also after all this process of ethnic cleansing and continue to be interdependent in many ways. And how they do that? They do that, they receive assistance in the form of this international peacekeeping, but not only peacekeeping forces, that this international authority helps to build the state in various ways. So this is like just glimpse to other places, horrific situations that we can see how it is possible, okay? I laid that as one foundation for my talk. And then I jump to a vision of a 2-state solution that can work. What do I mean by that? So here is the vision. I start with a very, after 100 years of bloody conflict, the 2 nations have embarked on a path of historical reconciliation. This reconciliation, based on principles of recognition, mutual respect, partnership, and equality, enables them to live in peace and security within the framework of two sovereign states, Israel and Palestine, in their historical homeland. Resolving the conflict has allowed Israel and Palestine to connect to the Middle Eastern region, enabling regional cooperation in various fields. And then the vision continues, because we look both on the overall picture, but also about the vision for Israel and the vision for Palestine, redirecting the parties' resources from war and conflict management to growth, welfare, and culture, has set both states and their citizens on a path of prosperity. And Israel, the national home of the Jewish people, is a democratic state that is a good place to live in. It is stable, secure, and thriving in various aspects of life across all regions, in Central Negev, Galilee, Jerusalem, for all its citizens and residents, and it maintains good neighborly relations with the state of Palestine and the entire region. Fundamental goals: self-determination, ending the Israeli occupation, ending the state of war and the threat of war, and the fear from expulsion, protection of the right to life, ensuring complete equality. This is from Megillat HaAtzmaut, of social and political rights for all citizens in both states, regardless of religion, race, or sex, etc. Economic and social welfare, respect for diverse identities, and good neighborly relations. Okay, so this, I think we can all agree on, right? That those are the goals that we would strive for the future of Israel. And so if we have this vision and goals, and we need to be clear, what do we start with? What are the building blocks so we need to be clear about the reality that we're starting from, and what in this reality is something that is unchangeable or should not be changed. It's not the same thing. And what are things that we can and should change? And so this is like what I'm thinking about, and giving both things. And I, in a moment, will go into my premises about understanding the realities. Giving the current situation, what is the best strategy to realize the vision and goals of the parties? I think this is the strategic question that we need to be engaged with. So here are the basic facts as I see them. Where are we at? So a first thing is that Israel is recognized as a historical homeland, not by one people, but by two. It is the historical homeland, and it's the same piece of land, okay? And I bring here like symbolic elements. The same piece of land is regarded by Israelis as their historical homeland, and by Palestinians as their historical homeland, okay? Another fact is that we are two people that aspiring for self-determination in this historical homeland. And here I'm going into two other premises. One is ethno-national mixing and comprehensive dependence across the country. And the other one is that Israeli control and supremacy over the entire region between the river and the sea, and over the Palestinians. And this is actually the fact since 1967. Okay. Here are basic assumptions for a stable peace, okay? And I will be happy to engage in questions about all the things that I'm saying now, okay? So, the first thing that I think is a basic assumption of mine is that we start with mutual recognition of a common historical homeland, the land of Israel and the land of Palestine. We need to come to a realization, to realizing the aspiration and the right of both people to self-determination in that historical homeland. And here are two assumptions about stable peace that I think we will argue about, okay? And I will explain a little bit more about them. So one of mine is that separation is neither possible nor desirable. This is one, and I will try to explain that. And the second is that instead of Israeli Jewish domination, I maintain that only collective equality will be able to support a stable peace in Israel-Palestine. So here are my arguments for why I think that, so I think this is, we have around 15 million residents, people between the river and the sea, around 9.5 million citizens, Jewish and Palestinians in Israel, around 8 million that we will Jews or affiliated with Jews, and around 1.5 million Palestinians that are citizens of Israel, okay? Of the Jews in Israel, around 750 live in settlements beyond the Green Line. That I'm including West Bank and East Jerusalem. Both of them are beyond the Green Line. In Palestine, around, all those numbers are before October 7. We don't know how many have left the country, both Jews and Palestinians. So the numbers that I know are around 5.5 million. They are not citizens because there is no another state. Palestinians are 3 million in the West Bank, around 2 million in Gaza, and around 400,000 in East Jerusalem. If we're looking, and this is in a way a picture for the people that support the old two-state solution. Those are, this is a picture of a map produced by Shaul Arieli, and it's like, if we're looking beyond the Green Line, we have, as I said, 750,000 Jews that live beyond the Green Line. Around them, 230 in East Jerusalem, around 500 in the West Bank. Out of them, between 115 to 175 are outside settlement blocks. So even if, and here I'm very, in a way, I forgot how to say it in English. If I'm like doing the maximum I can in order to support this offer. So even if we're going into changing, swapping territories, we're ending up with a very large population that we need to forcefully evacuate. If we look at Jerusalem, again, we are looking at around 240 Jews that are living in East Jerusalem, something that is unable. So if we're thinking about separation, is just, there is no way to separate in Jerusalem without massive destruction of the city itself. And even then, it's impossible. So starting with Jerusalem, I think a very basic realization that we need to come to, that there is no possibility for separation in Jerusalem, no physical separation. And if separation is not possible in Jerusalem, then the idea of separation collapses in the entire territory. I want to acknowledge that part of the problem of the interdependency, and it combines with the threat and the feel of threat, is that this is excerpts from a publication produced by Yesha, a settlers community. I don't know how many of you are Hebrew speaking or know those terms. So in their publication, what they're trying to convey is, if Israel is going to withdraw from the West Bank, this is how it is strategically impossible, because the West Bank is totally controlling the main areas of Israel. Okay, so why not to strive for separation? Why not cut the codependence between the people? So my first argument is that full separation is impossible, practically impossible. And partition, if we're thinking about partition and not demographic separation, will not lead to demographic separation and to the creation of homogeneous nation states. The second is that the assumption behind separation is forced eviction, and is ineffective, and raises moral and legal difficulties in the 21st century. and will not lead to a stable peace. And the third is that comprehensive dependence, that we are living in a so tiny place that even after separation will do all of that, we remain interdependent or dependent due to great physical proximity and dependence in variety of areas, including the economy, security, public health, ecology, environment, natural resources, infrastructure, and more. So what I'm offering is to think outside the box. It's essential to rethink the assumption that separation is necessary or desirable for achieving our vision that we started with, which I think we all more or less agree on. And we can think about how the separation from Gaza has led to the most severe violence that we have ever seen in our context. While in Israel, the Jewish-Palestinian relations are the least violent. And as I showed before, we are living in Israel with 1.5 million Palestinians. It's not, and me as a young woman in Israel, at that time, until the 90s, the borders were completely open. And Palestinians were not only allowed to go, they didn't need any permits, they were traveling, and they were driving all around, and Israelis were the same. So it shouldn't be, at least for people of my age, that it's not something that we cannot imagine. We lived during those times. But I know that it's a long memory. So why do I argue for collective equality? As I said, this is my book. So I went to do some work on why I think this is the basic basis for peace. Out of that, I share only few insights. One is that violent conflict reflects a struggle for domination and control, and a struggle over who will rule over whom. And this is, of course, part of how we Israelis, Jews, look at it, like the idea that it's either us or them. Either we will control them or they will control us. There is nothing in between. The fear that they will throw out to the sea, etc. So it is part of this fear and part of struggle for control. In a situation of codependence between the groups, equality between the conflicting nations, in the sense of the absence of control and dominance, is the only stable alternative to conflict. In a way, instead to go out of this struggle for domination, the only alternative conceptually is that neither will dominate the other. And apart from normative considerations, there are pragmatic and effectiveness considerations. Inequality between groups increases the risk of violent conflict, and equality-based peace arrangements are more stable. So, so in a way, when we're thinking anew about peace, we need to rethink a lot of concepts anew. What peace is, what is the role of peace agreement, what makes a sustainable peace, what is the role of partition and separation and segregation in that, and so forth. And we definitely need to review our thinking about security and other, and of course, trust, which is non-existing or the opposite of that at the moment. So what we offer that is different is to look at peace, or the model for peace, as together and apart. So on the one hand, we are supporting independence, national independence through partition, but that independence, because we are not existing in an island, we are understanding that we are codependent. This codependency, in order to be sustainable, need to be part of partnership among equals instead of domination and control. And from principles to applied model, I here took the principles of the political model that I was part of developing, which is 2 states, 1 homeland, what the Land for All movement is advocating for. So it starts with mutual recognition of belonging to the historical homeland and with equal right to self-determination. striving for 2 democratic states based on the Green Line, while land swaps are possible. It's not that it's possible, but it's not the core thing. We're thinking about Jerusalem as a united city, an open city that serves as the capital of both states. Security arrangements should rethink how we are providing security for all people. It's not a concern only of Israelis, it's concern of Palestinians as well. So we need to think how the security arrangements take care of everybody. We are talking about freedom of movement that will be gradually developed and adapted to the security situation. We're thinking a core thing in order to enable that will be to build joint institutions for matters that require shared management. We need to tackle the past injustices, but our principle is that we should do that without creating new ones. For example, our approach to the settlements and to the settlers. We're thinking about the transitional process. And here I add my thing. It's not that it's only a land for all. It's like, so I started with the Bosnian example. I think we will need help from external partners. We are in a way in a prisoner's dilemma, and we must have external help in order for us to get where we want to get. So we need to be clear on where we want to get, but we need help for that transitional process. We need to aim for regional integration. It's a benefit also that can come up, and it's clear that it can up from that. So I will jump quickly on those details, and we can go back to them. For example, to the details about how the freedom of movement should be developing, the question of residency and settlement, and so forth. In this model, for example, what we should think about is in each of the topics, there are things that will be handled separately, independently, and things that will be that needs to be taken care of jointly. And we need to think about all of that together. So we can think about democracy. There are challenges, as you know, to the Israeli democracy, and of course to the Palestinians, which is not existing. I think there are more similarities than we usually think in those cases. And we need to rethink what democracy is in our region. Again, citizenship and residency, security, language, education, culture and national heritage, religion, economy and work, health, social welfare, transportation, all of those things needs to be developed. Our ideas about them needs to be developed. What is independent, how Israel, how Palestine will do that, and what the togetherness, how that is handled. All of that needs a lot of thinking. So if you think, okay, this is very nice, but it's naive. So I argue that it's far from it. It's a pragmatic and realistic approach. It's based on accumulated experience in peace processes. It's supported by research. And it is like, if we're going there, it means that we are reducing the likelihood of violence. And, you know, usually when someone is saying, okay, ethnic cleansing is pragmatic, I would say brutality is not more realistic or pragmatic than human vision. So what I say is that, on the contrary, what we are offering is a positive vision that respects human beings as equals and making it a genuine vision for sustainable peace in our land. Why did I go there? Okay. Okay, that's beautiful. So how do we get there? I flesh out few points here. There is a lot more to say and more to think about it. As I said already, there is a need for external help. Us Israelis and Palestinians need to show the way, but we will need help in order to help us go that way. We need to build fair joint institutions. We do have joint institutions since Oslo, but they are unfair, really dramatically unfair, and they are doing the opposite of building trust. So this is one thing that we need to be investing in. We need to invest in alternative vision and culture, successful thinking that Israel interests is a Palestinian state, not only a Palestinian state, a thriving and successful Palestinian state. This is our interest. And what we need to know is to support this new paradigm that I'm offering, this new vision, a realistic vision for peace that is, and we need to build a new peace camp based on that new idea for peace. Some guidelines for the journey. First of all, we need to avoid promises that cannot be fulfilled and creating excessive expectations. I think that was something that has been done during the Oslo times, like imagining peace as something that is very easy. Okay, just sign this and everything will be fine. We need to build resilience to cope with setbacks along the way, and set spoilers because we know that there will be. And we need flexibility to listen to objectives and to develop appropriate responses to them. I think the starting point is recognizing this most basic fact that I tried to stress in my talk, that I mean Israelis and Palestinians that live here, that want to live in Israel, Palestine, we are both in the same boat, but we are in the eye of the storm. And the choice that we have is not whether we are in the same boat, whether we are together, or how are we going to do that? Are we going to fight against each other and then sink and drown, or whether we are going to start working with each other together, and then we might be able to save ourselves from the storm. And how will we know we've begun? So what we starts to need, so we need to realize the direction, to be clear on the vision, and we need significant leadership. It doesn't mean that we need the leadership. The moment leadership has no leadership to offer. We need to develop leadership, significant leadership. It could be in Israel and Palestine, it could be elsewhere, it could be everywhere. That acknowledges the unbreakable interdependence between us and offers a future for all of us. And what can we do to adopt the vision, if you think it's a good idea, and to be part and support of this new peace camp that we need to build. And here is a quote from John Hume, which I find, if you're familiar with him, he is a politician from Northern Ireland. He was the one that held the idea of power sharing in Northern Ireland. He's a Catholic, Irish Catholic, and he was the one that promoted a very clear voice about it since the early 70s. So, and he was saying, these words sum up the history of his party, together and apart, a future together. They are the words of hope and imagination, which have inspired our endeavors over the last 28 years. They explain the motivation which has kept us going, even in the dark times, when to hope was to be unreasonable, and to imagine a better future, a little short of wishful thinking. So, thank you. I'll stop here.
Lee Moore, thank you. Thank you so much. You've given us a huge meal to digest in a relatively short period of time. But hopefully, again, as I mentioned earlier, people will have read your Foreign Affairs article, A Two-State Solution That Can Work, that you did with Professor Dajani. I'm going to turn to Mark and John, and also look at questions that are coming in from the audience. But let me just start with an obvious one that I think anyone who is skeptical, one of the traditional responses for an aspirational argument like you've made is, well, what do the other side, what do they think? With whom do we negotiate? Do you have Palestinian partners who are thinking the same way? And you mentioned the huge challenge of building up trust. And we know that was a major challenge in the years leading up to the fall of the Soviet Union, the OSCE, the CSCE all focused on confidence and security building measures, trying to build up trust in a period of uncertainty. Well, this is many times more challenging than that. So in terms of those who would challenge you on the pragmatism of the aspirational vision is, where's the partner? Do they really imagine a shared peaceful future with a Palestinian state side by side an Israeli state, but with free flow of goods, services, and people?
Thank you, David, for that. So I'll answer quickly the two questions. Naturally, in such situations, the side with less power is more willing to part and to make peace than the one that is in control. So there is partner, a Palestinian partner. The hardest is to find an Israeli partner. It's harder to find an Israeli partner than a Palestinian partner. So we do have partners in Palestine. As you mentioned, this article is co-authored with Omar Dajani, a Palestinian. His parents are refugees from Jaffa. And in my work, both in my political work as in the Land for All, for example, it's a movement that is based on Israeli-Palestinian together. We're building that together. And also in my research project, okay? So I'm a researcher, that's what I do. I develop the knowledge and the concepts for this thing, and I work now, yes, well, I work hard on that for a long time, and I think we need to work harder now when it's so burning and we don't know when the window of opportunity will come. So we need to work fast, and we need to develop all those things that you saw that are not yet there. There is a lot of knowledge that is still missing in our paradigm that needs to be developed. And we are working on that together with Palestinians. And so there is a partner. And Israelis are not familiar with them, with the Palestinians, because since Oslo, we build walls instead of bridges. And I think we did the opposite in the last 30 years, like opposite of building the foundations for peace. We need now to reverse gear, and the first thing to do is to rethink our vision. That would lead us to a more, okay, so this is for the partner. There is a partner. We need to establish it both in Israel and in Palestine, and we need to work about it together. This is one thing. Regarding trust, as I said, there is no trust. The opposite of trust. There is fear, enormous fear, hatred. There is a sense of revenge. Of course, this is the situation at the moment. I'm not assuming that suddenly trust will be built. I'm just saying you cannot avoid trust. In either case, there is no way of avoiding the thing of trust. Even if we will be behind walls, you will need to build trust, but then the walls will prevent that kind of trust to be built. The opposite will happen. So what we are promising is to remain in conflict forever. And we see how dangerous this conflict can be. How dangerous, not only dangerous, devastating, horrific, okay? And so this is my two answers. It's not easy, it's not promised, but it's the only way forward.
John?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. It was comprehensive and very educative. As we talked before, if your idea is to begin by building trust, we all accept that today is not the time to be envisioning great things for these two people post October 7 and post the war in Gaza. It's obviously worse than post Second Intifada, in which everybody agrees was the end of trust. Now we're beyond that even. So we accept that. So we're talking about the future. But if your vision is first separation and then work towards through transition to confederation, then I get it. I mean, that's like the end of the Second World War. First, you separate, then you begin through small measures to begin to unify through treaties, and then eventually you end up with the EU, which I'm not sure is really a confederation, but it's something something that would be great if Israel and Palestine could achieve it. But I think my argument really is you need separation first. That these people need to be separated. They need to have their own independent states. Yes, there are issues of public health and environment and water that are going to have to be dealt with right from the start because they're codependent on those. But in terms of security and separation, I don't see separation as you do as somehow being Israeli domination. You separate, and then the Palestinians, they have access to the sea, they can go to Europe, they have access to their regional partners through Jordan and the Saudis. Yes, it would be great if they could start trading immediately with Israel and have some kind of economic agreement. But they're not dependent. They don't have to be dependent on Israel for everything. They can look elsewhere as well. And hopefully they will. But I just think separation, as I've said, no joint vacations, no sharing of the children, real separation to give each a chance to trust each other before we start sending hundreds of thousands of people back across the border, refugees coming to live as residents in Haifa. I think it's wonderful, but I think it's pretty far off. Israelis, Jews and Israeli Palestinians don't feel particularly comfortable living beside each other in certain parts of the country now. They do in the mixed cities, there's no question. But there's also separate little cities growing up beside each other because Israeli Jews don't want Israeli Palestinians there. So I'm just throwing that out. I think your vision is wonderful. I hope it can be achieved, but I see steps on the way there.
Thank you, John. So we clearly disagree. Let's make it clear, okay? We clearly disagree. And I understand that as I said, I'm not convincing anybody. I'm offering a vision. And if someone thinks it's a good idea, then I will be happy that he will join the effort for that. I disagree also that it's not the time. It's definitely the time. There is no other time. We must start talking big and far, and this is the time. What is needed to say to the general public, I don't know. It's not about that. But this is the time to think big and to look for the future, for sure. I do not agree with first separation. There is no first separation. If we'll go for first separation, I was not blunt at the beginning, but what Israel is doing now is an agenda of ethnic cleansing. We see it in Gaza, and since what the current government started long before the 7th of October, I looked at the principles of this government and I said, okay, they need a war and they're heading for ethnic cleansing, both in the West Bank and in Gaza, okay? So we need to be not naive about what Israel is up to, and this is what they envision. And now we're supporting that. Us here, the people in Zion. This is what they're supporting, and they don't see any problem.
I agree 100%.
Okay, so they are in separation, but separation in a way, not in the way that you're thinking. Nobody's thinking about evacuating settlers from the West Bank. Nobody's thinking about it. And I think if we invest one more moment on talking about evacuating settlers, we are just preventing any hope for anything. We need to reverse our thinking. The first priority is Palestinian independence. And then the question is, how are we going to make it in the 67 borders with adjustments, whatever? And then we see that separation is not, I live here in Jerusalem. We live together. most of like half of the personnel in hospitals are Arabs. And after the 7th of October, people were scared to death to go to places where they work together. But we had no choice. And we got used to it again with working together with Arabs. I'm in the university, Arabs are part of our staff and our students. And so it's true that there are people that are not, but I'm sure that everywhere, like blacks and whites in America don't want to live together. So what? We need to create the structures that enable them to work together. This is our reality here, and we think we can avoid it, but it's not possible. If you're thinking about separation, even if you will have the political power to do that, the next step will be that they will demand that the 1.5 million Palestinians that live in Israel will be evacuated to the Palestinian state. If you're going into this idea of separation, this is where we are going. But there is no option for that. In our tiny land, we live together, not only together. I'm not supporting a one-state solution because I think it's an apolitical solution. But I do support a two-state, but this idea of separation is really harmful. That's my belief. And as I said, I understand that we disagree. And so I don't think, that's why I think some comparisons are fruitful, some are not. We do look at the on the EU as a good example. I don't think we need to go back to the population transfers after the Second World War. I think also normatively, we are not there anymore. I think forceful transfer of people, me as an international lawyer, I would say it's illegal anymore, even if we're talking about settlers in an occupied territory. And therefore, I'm committed to allow to make sure that the conditions that I'm offering to everybody, those settlers are citizens of Israel, that Israel is responsible for them, and it sent them there, right? Most of them have been sent by Israel, and we need to be committed to their welfare and to offer them whatever will be reasonable for them, and including reasonable security for where they live at the moment. I'm not talking about everybody everywhere, okay? But in general terms. And yeah, I would say that.
Well, the final status issues always envisaged that the settlement blocks would remain. And if you're talking about the 150,000 that are illegal even under Israeli law, then I tend to disagree with you. They should be removed, and they should be removed now. But if you're talking about the others, then the swap was always the idea. So you describe current Israel as, in another few years, if Ben-Gvir and Smotrich get their way, the illegal settlements will continue to take over half the West Bank.
John, so just a quick remark on that. All settlements, as we know, are illegal under international law. Some of them are also unauthorized by Israeli law. The 150,000 are not, many of them are established settlements, like even among the old ones, like Ofra and Ali, all of them are outside the box. And there are many others. So you cannot assume that they are illegal according to the Israeli law. Some of them are really 40 years old.
Well, yep.
I'm curious, but before I turn to Mark, let me just ask, you use the Bosnia example when you open your talk. Why not the Lebanon example? If you're talking about federalism, confederation, if you're talking about confessionalism, ethno-nationalism, would there be more lessons from Lebanon and more, while we know it's close to being a failed state, if not a failed state, we also know the reasons for that. It wasn't that way before. So I'm just curious, why not Lebanon as a model to learn from, to be cautious about?
Okay, so definitely to be cautious about. Definitely. Also from Bosnia to be cautious about.
Sure.
But definitely. So, but so Bosnia can fit in some. So first of all, to open our mind to other options.
Mhm.
And in my book, I dedicate a chapter about rethinking democracy. Okay, part of the problem is that we have a fixed idea of how democracy, and you're Canadians, not Americans from the US. So I think you are more, I think, understanding that kind of challenges, and I think more open to other formats of democracy. I think, I don't know, we never talked about it before, but so I think part of the problem is that we are imagining liberal democracy as the only way, liberal democracy in the way of majoritarian vote, as the only way to imagine democracy. Okay, and you know, and the power sharing model is opening up that. It's a note also to when I said that we need to rethink how Israel democracy should look like. Okay, it's not functioning at the moment, as you can see, and we need to rethink also the democracy in Israel. So relating to Lebanon and why is not it Lebanon is not a good model, and it's a system, and there are many other systems that do not work in the world. Not only Lebanon. If you look around us, Syria and Yemen, so there are many failed states around the world. Lebanon is close to them. So that's why I'm starting with the principles, and the model is only part of that. Is not like I'm not married to a specific model. It's just enabling how we can envision another framework, another political framework. And there are a lot of things to be learned, but also with liberal democracy, as we can see.
Mark?
Thank you, Limor. I apologize, but as John had a problem at the beginning of the webinar, my internet also went out for a few minutes and I didn't get back on. So I missed part of what you said. So I apologize in advance if you covered this particular question. And if you did, then that's fine. You don't need to answer it. But I'm curious, I'd like to ask you, in terms of the short to maybe medium term of this process, what kind of initiatives, what kind of actions, projects could take place within Israel to begin building this trust and begin building this movement or the movement towards Israelis accepting the theories that you put out and the principles you put out? What kind of sort of concrete actions could be taken in your view?
Yeah, so I suggested few, and I think this is part of the thinking that needs to be done. We need to create a new peace camp, as I said, peace camp that is based on an alternative vision for peace. And since I said it earlier, since the Second Intifada, there is no peace camp in Israel, okay? Before the 7th of October, the conflict has not been discussed in Israel. It was a non-issue. It was a non-issue, and even it was not among the 5 topics that Israelis were concerned about. Okay, so this is the kind of severity that we are dealing with. At the moment, they are back on their agenda, but we know what kind of concepts us Israelis have. So I think a first thing is to reorient. This is a really important thing, to reorient our thinking about how peace looks like in Israel-Palestine, how it could look like, what peace is, and how it can be when we're talking about this kind of place, this kind of dense and intermingled place. This is the first thing that needs to be done, and we can do it in multiple ways. We can in such discussions and many others, and in being part of creating this idea, developing it further. And yeah, I think this is the main thing. And how do we do that? Then insert it into any kind of action that is relevant. If someone is involved in building or involved in in building any kind of cooperation between Israelis and Palestinians, it needs to adopt those kinds of principles of equality, of partnership, and so forth. And I think, I don't know, I think you are my part. If anyone that is joining this vision is a partner to developing it, it's really a new world. This is what we are offering, a new opportunity for action, a new opportunity for thinking, and there is a lot of to be done here.
So if
So-
I may just to follow up, if I may
Yeah,
just to,
please, Mark.
it seems to me that the media has a lot to has an important role to play in this in Israel. In other words, where Israelis are getting their news, getting their information collectively, wouldn't it make sense to begin to think about initiatives where you develop some programs on the TV networks and on the radio, particularly radio. Israelis listen to radio a lot, I know, and begin to get people like yourself to be, speakers and guests, and sort of to begin to change the perception, the attitudes of Israelis. They need to really engage in the conversation in a big way.
So I'm skeptical at that moment in time. We cannot forget that we are in a really horrific war. So I think that at the moment, the minds are not really, most of the minds, there are people that are exceptional, that are part of our initiatives, that are part of the discussions, that are understanding that force has its limits, and starting to ask the question of what can we do? If we understand the limits of force, what alternatives do we have? So there are those people, and they're not the majority. So I would say that my strategy for the moment is talk to leaders, people that can be thought leaders, that can be part. I would not think that at the moment the general public is open to such things, even
No,
to
I wasn't suggesting it right now. I was suggesting it once we get
later.
past this one.
Definitely. But in a way, that's why I'm thinking at the moment, it's like, it's the time to build our support, the core people that will be the leaders of that movement. In a way, we need to lead to create a movement in that direction.
So
Thank you.
there are a couple of viewers who've written in similar questions, and I'll just summarize it. And it goes back to where are you finding these, quote, trusted Palestinians who can take their side of your aspirational vision forward? Can you tell more about who would be the partners between the Israelis and Palestinians? Perhaps there are others as well.
Yeah. So
there's
you
a
mean,
series of questions about that.
what do you mean who? Like so there are names. Some of them are, so here is the problem. In Israel, our ability to work is shrinking, but it's still existing, okay? I still can have this conversation, hopefully not be arrested after that, okay? In Palestine is not as clear as that. So at the moment, I'm assuming it is easier to have those conversations and to work together. We are working together. I have partners. I have partners in A Land for All, and I have partners in my research, and in other initiatives that I'm part of. So they are here. I don't know how to describe them. They are East Jerusalemites that are working in, and it's very hard. I think part of my problem, because I'm an academic and a scholar, and I'm looking for scholars that will work with me. This is one of the hardest arenas to find at the moment cooperation, because of the boycott, which and the anti-normalization trends that are so strong in the academia, especially. But yeah, that's the challenge. But once it's clear that our vision is partnership, then it makes sense why we must strive for that kind of partnership. And as I said, I have a lot of Palestinian friends, and we are working together.
So far, Palestinian scholars outside of the Arab world, say in North America and Europe, they're not involved.
So Omar Dajani is from North
Right, he's
America.
in the States.
Yes, he is from the States. And how, so I don't know to say much more about that. I think the hardliners, many of them are from the diaspora. I think less than here. I think especially Israelis, Palestinians from here that live with Jews. I think that's part of the problem, that Israelis and Palestinians do not know each other anymore.
Yeah.
Or at least the Palestinians from the West Bank. The only Jews that they know are either soldiers or settlers. They don't, and we can, at the moment, since the 7th of October, we have no place to meet in Israel, Palestine. We must go abroad. There is no place. Although I live 10 kilometers from my Palestinian colleague, we cannot meet. We only can talk or Zoom, talk in the phone or Zoom, but we have no place to meet. Before the 7th of October, there was a place. It was very limited. It was hard. And for the Palestinians, you need to be aware of that. Even to go out of Ramallah is really risky. So they prefer not to go, even not around the West Bank.
And it's risky from the point of view of their own community, not from the point of view of Israeli security, Israeli defense forces, Israeli
No,
settlers?
because of the Israelis.
Because of the Israelis.
Yes. To go out of Ramallah for Palestinian these days, it's a risky thing. They will need to cross a checkpoint, even if they're staying in the West Bank, to anywhere. And then you don't know, and yeah.
Right. John, any follow-up?
Maybe I'll just take it on a slightly different direction. One of the issues that I think is becoming important is a Palestinian national project. I mean, if you're going to have a partner, or if I'm going to have a partner for either vision that we have, we've got a real problem in Palestine. You know, I'm one that argues for recognition of a Palestinian state, but I do it for a variety of reasons. But it's not because I'm confident that there is a unified Palestinian national project right now. You've got Hamas and PIJ and et cetera on the one hand, and you've got Mahmoud Abbas at 3% in the polls and no elections. What is your, what is your sense? I keep arguing that there are innovative, entrepreneurial, educated young Palestinians who can begin to form and devise that national project. But I just fear that without that, even if we had a center-right government in Israel that was prepared to talk to somebody, there's not somebody there yet. And the Western world talks about a revitalized PA taking over Gaza, which we would all love, but what is a revitalized PA, and when do we see it? Not that anybody's ready to take over Gaza and govern it right now anyway, but do you have a view of where Palestinians are at and who your partners might be? I don't mean academia, I mean in real,
Yeah. So, okay. So yes, I have. I'll say two things. First of all, not only Palestinians have a question about their national project. I think in Israel as well, this is the challenge. So while the Palestinian national project has, in a way, is in total failure, or I don't know, and I'm recommending to hear Yazid Sayegh. Have you heard his? I can send later, David, something. There are a couple of things that worth listening to from Palestinian voices. So I think they also agree. So I'm not inventing it. I think we are not the ones to criticize where they are at when Israel done so much in order to exactly do that, to dismantle Palestinian nationalism. So I definitely agree with that. And I know of a lot of efforts that are now happening from multiple areas to not to revitalize the PA, but to bring new institutions, national institutions. The project now is of Palestinian unity. For them at least, also by intellectuals, but not only from intellectuals. I hear it here. There are a lot of efforts that are being done with great people involved in an effort. I don't know if it will succeed, but I know that they are being done. And that's for one thing. I think Israel needs to do the same thing because we are in collapse. We are in collapse beyond what we are seeing formally in this takeover by the Netanyahu regime. We are in collapse because the population here is different, because the foundations, everything has changed. And I think even the protest is not understanding the challenge that is ahead. I'm really fearful. If Israel is going to elections, I'm really fearful about the results because we will elect again Ben-Gvir and Netanyahu. They will not elect something else because there is no alternative to Netanyahu at the moment. And so I'm really fearful of our situation here. And I think we miscalculate the divisions that we have in Israel. And we need to adopt another approach to democracy here, which is more aligned with how I view the prospects for solving conflicts like in Bosnia. I think we need to adopt the same things because we have different segments of the society that do not think the same thing. And we need the more consensus democracy than democracy that is majority vote. Like in a way how Ben-Gurion started this state, enabling large coalitions, enabling all segments of society to be part of the government. But so this is for the national project. I think the two people need to be engaged in a national project to build again their nations. And I think part of the collapse is the conflict because it fuels the extremists in both sides, as we can see. And the second question was, I forgot. Okay.
No, that was it. That was it. I agree. I just say, what we just saw happen in the United States is a foretelling of what could happen in Israel. That people will overestimate the hatred of Bibi and Ben-Gvir and not realize that there are, people that would choose them over. Mind you, I mean, if Bennett and company are the opposition, it's not exactly the left camp. It's not exactly the Kamala Harris type. So I mean, it isn't. I'm not a great advocate for Bennett, who loves the settlements and is ready to bomb Iran. But I mean, it isn't a Bennett, Lapid, the old coalition that was kicked out by Netanyahu and Ben-Gvir. Isn't that a possibility?
My estimation that it's not. It's a false opportunity. It's a false possibility.
False possibility. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where the protest camp is wrong about understanding our realities inside Israel and really taking the challenge seriously. It's like thinking, okay, we'll gear up. We have a majority. We do not have a majority.
You're on mute, David.
Don't the polls show that to the extent to which there is something you might want to call a peace camp, a left, never mind far left of center political camp, they are of a demography that is a minority and an ever shrinking minority in Israel.
Yes.
So if you focus the aspiration on democracy, then in fact, if you're looking for progress through votes, through political change in the Knesset, the data is suggesting that won't happen, that there have to be other routes. Does that require another crisis? Is it going to require a much more active Jewish diaspora trying to change? But the Jewish diaspora seems to have also moved to the right.
Yeah. or to abandon Israel altogether.
So, on the other hand, I want to read you, someone wrote in, an anonymous attendee wrote something very optimistic. We say that the situation is impossible, but Northern Ireland Good Friday peace agreement was impossible, that apartheid would never fall, that the wall in Germany would never come down. What you have done in the day after the American election, you have given us hope. So there is this sense, and I think among many, and I expect both in Israel and outside, the issue is what proportion do they carry within the bloc that matters, which is the voting bloc in Israel, or those within, especially the American diaspora, that can influence the American administration. And others have mentioned it's not clear that the newly elected American administration is so much in favor of a peace camp.
Yeah, it's not. No, we are definitely running against all odds, but this is the only worthwhile effort that I can see around. And that's what I can definitely. I don't look now for votes. Yair Golan, for example, even Yair Golan, which is the most leftist in our political system, offers no hope. He says, I do not trust the Palestinians, and therefore he's not even envisioning a peace solution. So it's continuation of the war in other terms. So even if he's suggesting this evacuation of settlers and then Israeli control, it's actually the worst of all worlds, because there is no hope. He will not go far with these ideas. I think it means that there is no Israel left at the moment. I hope we will build one that is really envisioning something else. This is why I'm insisting that the starting point is shifting how we're thinking about the situation, about our potential peace, our potential, and it must start with coexistence. We must start with the recognition of the other. I know that all around in this call is there. It's not existing in Israel at the same level. There are many good people in Israel, a lot of them, even if they're thinking otherwise than I'm thinking. And we are in extraordinary and very, very frightening times. So we need to take into consideration all that and to know what we can expect from such times.
Mark.
So, you don't have, you said, I think if I heard you correctly, you don't have a lot of hope for the next election, that you're worried that the Israeli electorate is going to elect Netanyahu's group again, and you don't have any hope for what was the sort of opposition coalition. Do you have any sense of what you think could be an alternative to the existing government? The election's coming up probably within a year and a half.
I think
what are the other options?
Yeah, I think so. I think our view needs to be for the long term again, because the short term it's not that we don't need to do anything for the short term. I'm just saying that we need to keep that those are processes of a long term thinking. For the short term, we need to build an alternative, and I hope some alternative will show up. I think it needs to be in some lines with what I offered here, and it's relevant both to internal politics and to external politics. We need to build it at least as an alternative, as a political alternative that will be out there, even if it will not create, because we need to create an alternative vision. At the moment, there is no, there is no alternative vision to the decisive plan of Smotrich. The decisive plan of Smotrich is the vision according to which the Israeli government is functioning. We need to be clear on that. And we need, sorry,
go ahead.
Okay, so if you are not familiar with the decisive plan of Smotrich, I think you should read it. You have, okay. No, I mean everybody. So my understanding that this is the leading vision currently of Israeli politics. And we need to have a clear alternative vision that is serious about peace and serious about looking at the Palestinians and seeing them as equals. This is the only alternative that we can have that makes sense. And yeah, and so what is the prospect? There are many. As I said, I don't know. There are so much uncertainty, and there are many players that are fighting back. We can have some wins. We can stop. I don't know. I don't know how this war is going to stop. I don't know what Trump is going to do, what Bibi is going to do. I know that without again, my assumption is that without a comprehensive peace plan, it doesn't mean that the comprehensive peace plan need to be implemented in 1 month, right? I've brought Bosnia in. It takes a long time to implement that. But what we do
Right.
need to have is a comprehensive peace plan that we know where we are heading, and then we can start moving into the direct direction. And then
Right.
it's
So
not
I was
only
just,
about, sorry, it's not
was just
only
trying
about
to
internal.
I was trying to drill down on the next election and what may
Yes.
happen there. Because the question of peace with Palestinians and two-state solution will not be the only issue
No.
presented to the electorate in an election campaign. And I'm trying to understand what alternatives there can be to the current government if you don't see that the former opposition coalition is there. And and certainly the short term is going to extend beyond the next election. And if this current government is reelected in some form, that short term is going to extend even longer.
Okay, so I will say only one more thing about what can be done in Israel, and it is about building not bridges but alliances across the divide. This is the major thing that needs to be built between what is now called the liberal camp and the ultra-Orthodox. I know at the moment it seems impossible, but without alliances, at least breaking down, like somehow there are forces. So that's my cross cleavage, internal cleavages. This is the strategy to see how such alliances can be built with different fragments within the Israeli society. That's the approach that I would take. I don't think at the moment that they're doing that. Maybe they're trying. I didn't see something out, but that's the strategy that I would think could be leading to something.
Limor, I think we're going to leave it there. You've given us 90 minutes of a really interesting, challenging discussion that's drilled down to a lot of very fundamental concerns. And certainly from the questions that came in or comments that came in, a lot of people were very inspired. They know it's a long haul, but they seem to be excited about the idea of thinking outside the box, because inside the box, they don't see alternatives that are appealing. So again, I urge everyone to read the article that you co-authored in the recent Foreign Affairs. We've sent it around to everyone, and your other pieces as well. And with that, thank you very, very much. Let me just invite Les Rothschild to say a closing word on behalf of Holy Blossom Temple, and we'll be in touch, Limor. Thank you.
If I can say one more thing, I'm as I said, I'm like now with the initiative of furthering our thinking and research on that, and I'm also considering to come to North America, maybe to the US or to Canada. If you have ideas about places that will be interested in discussions about that, I will be happy to know. And so, yes, that's
good. We'll be in touch, I'm sure.
Thank
you.
Thank you, David, for chairing. And Limor, thank you so much for coming. It gave, I think, in the one comment that one of the our people gave us hope, right? And it really did. Although then when we started to talk about current day and present day, the hope seemed to disappear a little bit. But I want to thank you again for bringing this message, because I think we need these kinds of messages, and we're happy to, through David, I'm happy to help in talking about you bringing the message further, right, to other people through in North America. I think it's an important message to hear even now, even though it's not really relevant at this moment, but you have to start. And I think you're kol hakavod for you to take this on, for you and your people to take this on. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for hosting me.
I just want to mention two things for next week. One is on Wednesday, November 13th. We will have
Deborah Lyons.
Deborah Lyons. That's it. That's what I'm looking for. Thank you, David. Deborah Lyons coming to Holy Blossom. Deborah Lyons is the Canadian Special Envoy on preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism. She has not been given, or as far as we know, she hasn't been given many community talks. This is one of her first ones. So we're honored to have her to come. And I'm encouraging you all to come to Holy Blossom. It will be online as well, but we're hoping to have a good crowd there. And that's next Wednesday evening. And then next Thursday, a week from today, we continue with Israel Dialogues with Asher Susser, who many of you know, who's been a friend of ours for a long time and always brings some interesting and challenging commentary to it. So those are the two things.
Asher will be focusing on Israel, Palestine, Jordan connections.
Okay. So great. Thanks, David. Thanks for that. And thanks everybody else. And again, toda rabah. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Wow.